In this recorded tutorial, we are going to look at the modify tools Fillet and Chamfer. The Fillet tool will take a square corner and turn it into a rounded corner. The Chamfer tool will take a square corner and put a diagonal across the corner. So let's have a go with the Fillet tool first. The Fillet tool lives just here on the right hand side of the modify panel on the Home tab. When I click on the Fillet tool, it gives me the option to press the down arrow and select some settings. The most useful setting is the radius setting. So we're going to select that, and this now allows me to type in a radius for my corner. So if I type in 100 and select the first line, when I hover over the second line, it will give me a preview of what's going to happen. Select the second line and we're done. And because these were separate lines to build up this square, we actually have a separate arc, and if we wanted to, we could modify this further. Just going to undo that, and that's it really for the Fillet tool. The only other thing that's worth knowing is that if we select a radius of 0, it will take two lines and turn them into a corner. It will join them together, and that will happen even if the arc wasn't there. So if I've got two lines that aren't quite touching, use the Fillet tool with a radius of 0 and it will connect them together. The tool can be set to a radius of 0 at any time by holding down the Shift key whilst you're clicking on the lines. The Chamfer tool lives just underneath the Fillet tool in the drop down menu, and the most two useful versions of the Fillet tool are distance and angle. So we're going to have a go with distance, and it's going to ask me for two distances now, and this will be the distance from the corner back along the first line and from the corner back along the second line. So I'm going to type in 300 for the first corner and 200 for the second. And if I select now the first line, it's going to apply those two lengths in the order that I click on the lines. So if I click on the bottom one first and then the second one, I get a chamfer that way. And if I press the space bar to start up the chamfer tool again, and this time I'll select the vertical line first and then the horizontal, you can see the two differences there. Using the angle tool, using the angle setting, we have the option to put in two different angles. So I'm going to type in 45 for the first and 45 for the second. And now when I click on my two lines, you can see that I get a 45-degree chamfer, and that will not give me the option to put a distance in. So it's just created it as near as it can across that corner. So I don't know the length for this line now, and if I needed to know the exact length, then I would need to use the distance tool. The next tool we're going to look at is the array tool. There are three different types of array, and the first one we're going to look at is the rectangular array tool. We select the tool and then we select our object and press enter, and by default we get an array that is 4 columns wide by 3 rows high. And we can see that we've got all the settings up here. The ribbon menu is completely changed, and we have the option to add and remove rows and columns. So I'm going to change the columns to, let's say, 6 and the rows to 4. And you can see that by changing these values here, just like the table options really in Word or Excel, we can add and delete rows accordingly. We also have these blue nodes which we can use to change the values dynamically. So if I click on this one and drag down, you can see that I can remove and add rows, and this one over here will allow me to change the columns. I've also got these two blue triangles here, and I can change the spacing. I can actually be more precise with those values by changing them up here in the text boxes. You can see that I've got two different values. I've got total or distance between. And if I wanted to, let's say, change these so that they covered a distance of 5 meters, and this will be from the center of the first circle to the center of the last circle, I just come up to the totals text box and type in 5,000, and now that has created an array that is actually spanning 5 meters from center to center. However, if I knew that I wanted a certain distance between the objects, I could change the between value. So let's say I wanted 500 between the center of the first circle and the center of the next, to the center of the next, and so forth. Then this between value allows me to do it, and you can now see that the total distance from the center of the first to the center of the last is 3.5 meters. When I close the array, it drops me out of the editing command and I can carry on drawing. If I reselect my array, you can see that they are still all one object, and if I move these, they all move together. When I go back into the editing command by selecting the object, I can carry on editing it as I wish. I also get a new button up here that says Edit Source. If I click on Edit Source, it says select an object in the array, so I'm going to select one of the circles. It will give me a pop-up just to warn me that I'm about to edit. And now I can carry on and edit this circle. So I'm just going to draw some lines in just so you can see that something's changed. And you can see that that is now mapped and mirrored across every single object in the array. To finish editing, we can right click, go to Close Array Edit Session, Save Edits to Array, and we're done. We can also choose to replace an object in the array. Select the array, and this time we're going to go to Replace Item. I'm just going to change the distance a little bit more so you can see what's going on. We're going to go to Replace Item, select an object to replace, so I'm going to select this heptagon and press Enter, and now select the midpoint. So I'm just going to try and pick this up somewhere around the center, click, and now every object I click on in my array will be replaced with that new object. When I'm done, I right click and I go to Enter and go to Exit, and that's it. We're now done with the array. When we create an array for the first time, we have this option here that says associative, and if we switch this off and close the array, you can see that now instead of all the objects being selectable as one, they are actually individual items, as if we placed them there ourselves manually. We can also create that option. I'm just going to redo the array and make sure that associative is switched on, and you can see that they're now back to being all one object. And if we use the command explode, that also creates the objects and removes the association. The next tool we need to look at is the polar array. If we select the polar array and select their object, the first thing it asks us for is a center point for the array. This is the point where the polar array is going to circle. So if I just click over here somewhere, you can see I've now got a polar array with items by default of 6. Let's change that. And number of rows, let's change that to 3. Just as before, we have these blue nodes where we can dynamically change the amount of rows. We can also change the spacing. We also have the option for associative, just as before. The last array option is the path array. For this version, we need the object and a path for it to follow. So I'm just going to draw a spline for it to follow, and then I'm going to select the path array, select the object, press enter, and then it says select the path or curve. So I'm going to then click on my spline, and you can now see that we've got that object following the path of our spline. We can change all the settings as before, so let's put in a row of 3. Let's change the spacing, I might do it over here. And I can even at this point select my spline, and when I change the shape of my spline, the array will follow. There we go. And when we're done, we can even delete the spline and just be left with the array.